And so it is. All right, welcome to Strong Params, Model Validations, Error Handling, and related things. So I want to get a sense first of where we're at. So let's start with strong params. Who can tell me what strong params are? Adrian, do it. I believe in you.
I'm not entirely sure. I feel like they're kind of like almost like gatekeepers, making sure you're getting like the right data.
Hey, I like that. So it's a gatekeeper. It's like our first gatekeeper because model validations are another kind of gatekeeper. All these things are gatekeepers. So I want you to think about what the purpose of this particular gatekeeper is. Why is it useful to explicitly say what params we will and won't accept? Just think about that for a second. And then I want you to spend 2 minutes slacking me your best summary of why you think we should use strong params. 2 minutes, go. All right, fire off what you got. Yeah, I think everybody's like in the ballpark. Adrian, I really liked your answer. Would you be willing to share?
Yeah. What did I put? I put seems like strong params are a security measure to make sure the input your backend is receiving is valid for the attribute. I think it's to prevent people from like spamming or hacking into your code by inputting their own types of code or invalid data.
Yeah. And most people recognize that like we're protecting the database. But I want to draw a distinction here because we have a bunch of different levels of validations. And we could say, all of them are for the database. But if that were the case, we only need one of them. So let's diagram this out a little bit. Also, if you were curious what garbage system we use to deploy your curriculum, looks like this. And they change the naming scheme every 2 months. Awesome. Okay, so let's say a user's filling out a form. Saw someone mention that like, well, we want to improve the user experience. Like if somebody's filling out a form incorrectly, they want to like get that feedback right away. This is true for a lot of that stuff. That's a different kind of validation. We'll call those form validations. Anytime you set the data type on a form element, that's a type of validation. So if I say the type of this input is number, I can't put T in it. I can't put Kyle in it. I can't put a file in it. It's got to be some kind of number. And then I could also mark that something is required. And so if a user tries to submit a form and they're missing a required field, cool. Then before your client does anything, it'll put a little red star next to that field and tell you, you forgot a required field. That's the like tight UX. That's a form validation. So then we submit the form and it gets to our server. Specifically, it gets to a controller action. Let's see. So then we have another gatekeeper here. We can say, all right, this form validation, that does some of the work, but if it's running on the client and forms are always running on the client, like watch this shit. If I go to some form on the web, let's see, let's go to like just some login page. Oop, oh. Maybe Instagram. All right, so let me see how they implemented this. All right, so there's an input. They used ARIA required, true. That's unhelpful. So this has a max length of 75. So you can't enter something in that field more than 75 characters. Oh, really? Well, now it's 175. It's just running in the user's browser. They can do whatever they want with it. If something's required, they can delete the required thing. If it's not required, they can make it required. Like you can edit this stuff however you want. So that can't be our be all end all gatekeeper. So it gets to the controller action, and then we have to say something like, all right, how do I make sure that I got the right thing? So you're protecting your server at this point, and your first line of defense is strong params. Then your controller action is probably trying to get to the database somehow. That's the end goal here. And before it can get there, the only way your controller action is interacting with the database is through your model. Your model is what's connecting those two things. So, here we have model validations. So why do we have both of these? If these are both about like keeping bad shit out of our database, why do I need both? Why can't I just rely on my model validations?
Extra security?
If you didn't have strong params, they could send things that you weren't allowing into your model through the model validations.
Yeah, that's part of it. What else?
I don't know if this is right, but your strong params pick specific things that you want to send to your model validation, so you know exactly what you're putting those validations on.
But that's kind of what the model's doing. The model validations are doing, though. Like, we can also cherry pick stuff from our model validations.
Only what you allow in the strong params gets passed to your model validations, though.
That's true. But I can also like filter all that stuff out with model validations. Why on earth would I ever use strong params? Is the only thing we do in a controller action work with models?
Does it have to do with how the page loads everything up? So like if you catch it in the strong params, you can re-render the information without reloading the page?
Nope, that would all be client side. But yeah, you can do pretty robust client side validations like that.
Does it have to do like with what kind of like redirect it has? Like I don't know what kind of data it's sending back to the client?
Nope, good guess though. So sometimes our controller actions like work with models, just one model. Could work with more than one model. Could also work with some external API. These model validations will protect the database, but if what I'm doing in that controller action isn't working with a model, it's making an API call, no protection against that. So really, strong params are protecting our actions, whatever we might want to do with them. And then also before something gets into the database, because we can also put stuff in the database not from a controller action. We could have initializers, we could have all kinds of different shit that's trying to create and update models over here. That's why they all have their own gatekeepers. What we've done all through Mod 2 is that we make the same 5 actions every time they write to databases, whatever. That's not the only way you can do that, though. We can make these more complex. So they all want to have their own gatekeepers. And also, I'll say it, strong params, it's pretty weak, despite the name. we can't specify uniqueness. We can't specify how long or short something is. That's not the point. The point is, I want to make a whitelist for what comes into this action. That's how I'll have some confidence that the action was used correctly. Strong params protects the action, model params protects the model, and therefore the database. Ask me some questions about that.
So if you're not using like an API and you're working strictly with models,
Yep.
are strong params even necessary?
Not necessarily, but consider this. If somebody's sending us the wrong params, we want to fail that as quick as possible. Failing it at the strong params, way faster than failing it with a model validation. Just takes out a step. So we get a quicker response. Also, a model validation, since it can do a lot more, is more expensive. So we can use a cheaper validation first. It's a good reason to do it. What else? You might have a model validation that's like, the dog model doesn't allow this thing. If somebody's just randomly trying to well, not randomly, if they're deliberately trying to break your API, you want to expose as few details about how your backend works as possible. So strong params, you go, I don't know what the fuck you just sent me, but it's like not acceptable for this endpoint. Rather than, no, dog names have to be less than 75 characters. You don't want to give an attacker any information that you don't have to. More questions about strong params?
So I haven't really messed around with sending something that it doesn't, that you didn't define in your strong params. What kind of error does it raise an error? Does it just not grab it? What does it do?
So I think by default, what it does is it just strips out anything that isn't in that whitelist. So if it's expecting first name, last name, age, and you send it first name, last name, age, political affiliation, it's just going to strip out political affiliation and only give you those three. So then what happens beyond that, that's up to whatever other logic you have in there, including model validations. If the age isn't 18, then the model validation kicks that back. Another related concept in strong params is called strong params, whitelisting, and sanitizing. So this is, all right, well, I got sent this random stuff from an HTTP request. Why don't I clean it up real quick before I pass it on to the rest of the action? And that might be, doesn't even need to be malicious. It might also be I get all of this other stuff about the type of browser that sent it and whatever else. That's not important. Nothing downstream needs to see any of that. So I'm going to clean that off.
How does that work?
It just strips it out.
But I mean, how procedurally, how do you make that work?
So things that you list as strong params, those are the only things that come through when you use your strong params.
Okay, so your specific list. Okay.
Exactly. So you pass that a hash or whatever, and it's just going to strip out any keys that aren't in your strong params. Other questions about this? Neat. Let's see it in action. dogs and dog owners, flashing back. Let's see, I'll do a Rails spam, no, MKCD, Rails new API model validation strong params stuff. Oops, what did I do? I just, oh, come on, Kyle. Good gravy. I did 2 commands at the same time. Do I have a new folder in here? No. All right. So there we go. I'm gonna Rails new API backend. All right, so I'm going to go to this backend folder. I'm going to generate a controller for dogs. And so it is. Go over to this dogs controller. Let's get away from the CRUD action stuff. So we'll say something like def who.dog. And what it's going to do is render JSON something. So then we're going to route to it. If I get a GET request to buddy, it's going to send that request to the dogs controllers who.dog action. Cool. So that should work. Run that on 3000. I go to my buddy route. Hey, and there we go. Good so far. Now let's pull up Postman and try sending that some stuff. God, always pick the wrong one every single time. Okay, so getting something back in Postman. All right, what if I were trying to send it some data? So maybe I, oh, look, I actually sent that stuff along. Those are the params that got sent over. It's a good reason to do strong params because look, it's from some other lesson, my son's imaginary dog Boosie. There it is. Came right into the controller action. Who knows what that might do if I do something with that. So make this a post request to buddy instead. I'll say, why don't you show me all the params that I got sent over? Cool. So I do that. Oops, don't I get request anymore? Look at all that shit I sent over. That's a lot. So if I want to start stripping some of that out, so I'm only working with the stuff that I've explicitly said I want to use in this action. Think about how you would help me strong paramify that. Think to yourself for a sec.
Would you need a private method?
Probably would. So I want, only things that I want to come over are name and age. So I want you to tell me what you would add to my code that would whitelist name and age from the response. Think to yourself for a second. And now I would like you to write that code and Slack it over to me. What needs to get added to this so that I whitelisting only name and age coming over? Go. 2 minutes. Okay, send me whatever you got. Cool. So it sounds like we're mostly in the right place here. So I saw lots of marking this as private. What's private mean?
The user won't be able to see it.
The user won't be able to see it?
The only place it can be called is within methods of that instance.
There we go. Only dogs controller can use this. So I make some dog params. And then when I say params dot require dog, and then permit name and age. So there's a really good question about this require. We'll see that in a sec. Okay, so if I do this, let's see what I get back. keep this server running. All right, that's up. All right, so let's see what happens if I run this now. Got the exact same thing. What the hell? That didn't strip out anything.
You need to call dog params up above instead of just params.
There we go. I need to actually use my strong params. Okay, so if I do that, let's see what happens. All right, all right. Now I'm only getting name and age. I sent this over, got back that. So I got an excellent question about what that required dog is doing. What does that look like it's doing there? Again, this is the thing that I sent over. This is the thing that I got back. Here, we can take a look at all the code at once. And that's what my code is. Do some pattern matching.
It's standardizing what you receive, therefore putting it inside of a nested hash of dog.
There we go. Standardizing the thing that I receive. I like that.
This is similar to the serializers and why we would use those, correct?
Yes. Serializers are about standardizing responses. You can think of like a strong params as like a serializer for your input. Dope.
If you wanted to get the dog name, so Boozy and Imaginary instead of Duncan, would you do, like inside the require, is that where you would go a level deeper?
So what we would do is we would whitelist in dogs also. So now when I do this, unpermitted parameter dogs.
And I mean only Boozy and Imaginary. Like just get rid of Duncan. Just skip over that.
So if we wanted to
level.
go through that, I don't know. Here's how I would find out. So I would go to the Rails strong param docs. All right, so ooh, look at this. You can also use permit on nested parameters like this. So looks like what we're doing there is still trying to have me let those dogs through. I might need to do something like that. Let's see. See how they did it over here. Yeah, I think that they do it like it's a hash. So if I do that too, let's see what happens. Man, it still didn't come through. Still says unpermitted parameter. Okay. I feel like I have that in my params. Okay, so I'm permitting name, age, and this dog's hash. I might need to poke around on that a little bit more. I will do so and get back to you.
Does the entirety of dogs in your array need to be surrounded in additional curlies? Looks like they do that in some places in there.
It shouldn't here because it should be able to infer it pretty well. But hey, what do I know? It's not working. So let's give it a shot. Nope, still nothing. All right, I'm going to play with that more and get back to you. It's a good one. Good stuff to teacher. Come on. There we go. Cool. So that's our our basics around strong params. Other questions about what those are, what they do?
In the docs, like right there, it says require is not used, but then at the bottom of the page, require is used. So what's the difference?
Yeah, let's take a look. Let's see what happens if I drop that out. Oh, weird. Came back the same way. Pretty dope. What happens if I take out age? Magical. I wouldn't lose too much sleep about strong param stuff. It's a hyper Rails specific thing. Most web frameworks have some way to do something like this. The Rails approach, this is the only one I've seen that does it this way. And like, it's easy enough to pattern match when you need it. Let's talk about model validations a little bit. So I'm going to make a model. Rails G model dog. And I'll go to that migration that it made for me and say that it has a string for name and an integer for age. I'm going to run that migration. Let's see, Rails DB migrate. Cool. Let's put some dogs in there. Okay, so then over in our, let's make just a regular old index method for this. Gotta make a route. All right, so there's my buds. And if I want to add one, then might do something like name. Well, I can pass in my dog params. Okay, cool. So can I add a dog? If I go over here to post to dogs and send over Duncan the dog, nothing matches post dogs. Create. Oop.
You want to add age to your strong params too? We took it
What was
out.
that?
Do you want to add
Oh.
age to your?
I probably should. Good catch. All right, so can I add Duncan? I can add Duncan. All right, strong params are doing their thing. So now let's say I want to limit how old the dog can be. This is the puppy database, puppies only. So I want you to think about what I would add to this dog model to reject anything where the age is over 4. Think about that to yourself for a sec. What am I going to add to this class to disallow creating a dog under 4 or over 4? Write it out and select it over to me. Go. Almost will. that's not a thing that like you have to type a whole lot. All right, send me over what you got. All right, a little bit of a spread, but we're in the ballpark. So this. So remember, we're doing this in the model because might come in from somewhere other than a controller, might come from a service, something like that. So Bob, walk me through yours. I like yours.
So you would put validates age.
Okay. So
And then-
hold on, pause there. So this is so validates is our like validation keyword. It works kind of like adder reader and adder accessor did. It's a macro, and then it's going to take the thing that we're validating as a symbol. Cool. And then what, Bob?
And then we want to check to see if it's a number.
Yep.
So numericality, which is a dumb word.
Yes.
True.
Uh-huh.
And then in curly brackets, we want to check the value of the number. So less than or equal to 4.
My linter doesn't like the syntax here. I'm not sure I'm crazy about it either.
Should true and the less than or equal be in its own hash?
Yeah, what if I do this? Let's see what that does. Okay, so if I try to add Duncan again, that should fail. Hey, unknown validator. Well, that's not the one that we wanted. What else? What else can
Do
I
you
try
put
here?
true and less than or equal to 4 inside of curly braces?
So if I do that, what's the key for true?
There isn't one.
Yeah, there isn't one. That's why this. That's why my linter doesn't like this. So if I put curly braces around it, that's a hash.
Could you say?
Hold on, pause a sec. Let's simplify this. So if I just did this, let's see if it validates. So if I change the age to something that's not a number. Okay. I got something back, but didn't make it into the database. I think I can prove that too. If I go over to localhost 3000/dogs, yep, my other Duncan record, my I got something back. We'll deal with that in a second, but it didn't get added to my database. That's good. So the numericality check is presumably working. What else could I try to get that less than or equal to 4 to work?
The true and less than or equal to 4 in an array?
Maybe. Let's see.
I meant starting at true.
Ah. Okay, that's valid syntax. Let's see if it works. So if I try to change this to 100, that one made it in. Dumb Kyle's in the database now. This is the puppies only club. Let's take a look at the docs.
Only integer.
So what's happening here? Numericality true worked on this one, but what's this one doing?
Maybe you only use true if you're not passing anything else. Like if you're not
Yeah, I like that. So we can give these things simple answers, but if we need to be more specific, then they take a hash. So instead of doing something like that, I maybe want to do something more like that. And then like we could have only integer. We got these options then. Only integer, greater than or equal to, odd, even, other than, something that it isn't. Okay, so let's try that. If I try to add dumber Kyle, hey, looks like I successfully kept that out of the database. Pew, pew, pew. Not bad.
If you didn't have the only integer true and only had the less than or equal to 4, would it like check whether it was numerical or not before evaluating if it was less than or equal to?
Maybe. Let's see. So if I try to pass in doesn't look like it made it in. So yeah, that like implied the numeric check. Another thing you'll see a lot in Rails, by the way, this is a hash too. That's one of the reasons the syntax is what it is. So we could rewrite all of that like that. That's really common throughout Rails. Having like a symbol or something as the first argument and then having the second argument be a hash. You see it all over the place. And it's because you can leave those curlies off and end up with that the syntax that looks like you're passing in an arbitrary number of arguments. Like we could also say something like presence true. That would make it required. And we can look like we're just adding as many arguments as we want. But really, there's only 2 arguments, the symbol and the hash. And that hash can have as many nested hashes as it needs to. So then I could also say that I want to validate that they gave me a name, because right now I can do something dopey like leave off the name. And uh-oh, I think that worked. Maybe. Maybe it didn't.
The age is too high.
Ah, that's why. Okay, so if I do some puppy, uh-oh, that got an ID from the database. Oh no, a null age. So I can do another one there and say like, you should kick that back. Now, didn't allow it. Now, worth mentioning that with all this stuff we've done, that's not an error message. A 200 status isn't an error. So the third thing we were going to talk about was dealing with errors. How do I do that?
You don't want to do dog create, you want to do dog new, and then try to save it. And if it does say, or you're going to do a dot valid question mark.
Okay. So yeah, I could do something like that. I could also try to save it. So if I save it, I send it back. Otherwise, all right.
You need to take the question mark off of save.
Oop, yes, I do. Let's see if that works. So if I try to send somebody without a name, no go, Monfrere. If I make this Pupworth, makes it in. What if I want to like be a little bit more specific about what the problems were? Anybody know what I can do?
At dog.errors.fullmessages.
Hey. Dog.errors.fullmessages, you say. All right, let's see what comes back. If I try to leave off Pupworth. Pew! Errors. So some takeaways. We got different gatekeepers for all the different parts of this. Want to have a gatekeeper on the client just for UX, so that we don't even make a network request if something isn't right on the client. But stuff can come into our API from forms. They can come out from other servers. They can come from malicious actors. They can come from native mobile apps. And so we want to standardize our inputs with strong params. Then when we're interacting with our database, we want to ensure that we're adding valid stuff in here. Now, also worth noting, we get some of that in the database also, because the same database could have a Rails app serving it, and a Django app serving it, and a PHP Laravel app serving it. Like, so this database might also have any number of other things interacting with it. So what's the validations that we have in a database?
Column data types.
The data types. So our data types end up protecting the database also. So that's a big takeaway from this. Our strong params, they're pretty weak, all told. All they do is let us say yes or no. Something can or can't come in. Model validations, we can get a lot more tweaky with. We can even write custom validations, like this person's cool or not. Awesome. What else you want to know?
Is there any way to retroactively clean the data in the database? So like the dog that got put in that was 100, that's not a puppy?
Ooh. Yes, I wouldn't do it from Rails. What I would do is go into the database directly. And like, this is a real fine use case for like writing good SQL queries. So maybe I write a .SQL file that extracts this data, transforms it somehow, and then loads in my transformed data. This is called an ETL, extract, transform, load. They're really common. But yeah, I might select all, select all from dogs where name is null. Hey, and I got that record. So now I might do something like, nope, I'm just getting rid of them. So I delete from dogs where name is null. Cool. Where my dogs at? I could also do delete from dogs where age is greater than 4. I go back over here. Pups only, man. But yeah, I would do that directly with the database rather than going through the application. Anything else? All right, I owe you guys a write-up of the that permit require thing, but elsewise, happy studying. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks.